Hey guys, Coach Dan here. We have lower body number 2 today. So we're going lower body workout number 2, starting with a posterior chain dominant exercise. So what I have been doing on this day recently is a stiff-legged deadlift. Now that exercise is destroying me. That in combination with a dumbbell rear foot elevated split squat is just making the rest of the workout almost unmanageable. So what a concept that I normally apply, but I've been pushing excuse me, some numbers on these lifts recently because I find it fun, is stimulus to fatigue. So stimulus to fatigue is that the exercise gives you a larger stimulus and a lower level fatigue, or as much as possible. Now, in some circumstances, exercises give you large amounts of fatigue and low amounts of stimulus, and that's an easy get rid of that exercise. It's giving you a great stimulus. It's giving you a lot of fatigue, beating you up, but not actually, getting what you want from it, getting the target muscle worked to what you want. So instead, we want it to be as close to the other way as possible. Large amount of stimulus for the muscle that you want and the goal that you want. So let's say it's muscle growth. Large amount of stimulus for muscle growth for that muscle, and lowest amount of fatigue as possible. Now that is, the unicorn. That's the best. That you get everything you want from that exercise. It doesn't tire you out. It doesn't hurt your joints. It doesn't do anything like that. But it's not often perfect, that ratio. So sometimes you'll get an exercise. Hey, stick with me. This story will come back around and make a point here. Sometimes you have an exercise that has a high amount of stimulus, but also a high amount of fatigue. And in some circumstances, you can make that trade-off and be okay and recover and be fine. But I've just found for things like the stiff-legged deadlift and the Bulgarian split squat with the dumbbells, that is no longer sustainable. Or I could be being a little bitch, but really, I do those deadlifts, and even by the end of those, I'm so wrecked that the Bulgarian split squats are rough, and then every exercise after that, I feel, half dead. So the goal then is to kind of find a new exercise for the time being that gives this ratio and improves this ratio. High amount of stimulus, lowest amount of fatigue possible, and maybe over the course of time, because the weights have gone up on the stiff-legged deadlift, that's affected me. And maybe I just need a break from it. I do quite like it, but I find it really fun and enjoyable. But yeah, it's probably drilling me to the point that I need a little bit of a break for it. So we've got a couple of changes we're going to make. We're going to try that on the belt squat on the RDL, an RDL on the belt squat, increase the amount of stability that we have and see how that feels. It's been a long time since I've done that, and I remember quite enjoying that. And then we're going to find a different variation of split squat that hopefully has the weights reduced and the stimulus go up, as lame as that might seem. So those are a couple of the, the nuts and bolts of today, a couple of the technical aspects. So we'll head out there in a minute. We'll go through this belt squat. Now, the tough thing about the belt squat, you don't see them in all gyms, and that's a bit of a bugger. So some replacements you could make could be something such as a cable version, but for me, the cable version wouldn't quite be there because the weights are not quite challenging enough. So yeah, so in that circumstance, I'm sorry, but maybe it's not working for you. Something like a good morning on the Smith machine, or a good morning on a, some sort of other machine you might have, or a dumbbell RDL to mix it up, or a B stance RDL where you split the stance, these kind of variations to kind of sub out for a period of time if you're suffering from a similar kind of issue. Maybe the issue is that I'm just a massive sook, and that could be possible. Anyway, whatever it is, I'm making these changes and I'll cop the heat. All right, let's hit this belt squat RDL. Okay, so we reintroduce the belt squat RDL. So this is the belt squat machine. We essentially, instead of having a belt attached to this, we take this handle and we hook this handle in, and we're essentially going to do an RDL on this. Now, I quite like this from a few perspectives. Number one being the stability is eliminated compared to something like the standard RDL or the stiff-legged deadlift that I haven't been doing, so that's good. A downside is that because this is a lever system, or it's on a hinge, the weight required to make this quite hard is high. Now that's good for the ego, but I have to haul some plates back and forth and stuff like that, so that is a potential downside. So some of the key pointers when doing this, we're going to hook in to this handle. I'm going to line my feet up at the same level of that handle. Nice flat back, hips nice and high. I've already got a pre-stretch in my hamstrings, and then coming through from there. Butt back, feel that stretch, come through from there. I remember this being really good. I remember the weight that I needed was pretty high. I don't know where my previous record on this has gone as far as my log goes, so I'll have to figure it out here, but I know it's relatively high. So we'll build up to that. We'll show a couple of working sets from a couple of different angles so you can have a look at how I kind of set it up. And that's about that. What else I got for you? No, that's good. Let's do a couple of working sets and then we can check it out. RDL on the, or stiff legged deadlift on the belt squat done. Pretty good. So stability is high there, which is good. Felt pretty good. I feel less fucked after doing that than I do from doing a standard stiff legged deadlift that I have been doing, and that was kind of the goal, is just that huge fatigue that's been coming with the heavier stiff legged deadlifts as I've been progressively building my weight up. Now, a downside to that, as I think I mentioned over there, is that it's a hinge system. So whereas a deadlift is coming directly down against gravity, the belt, our version of the belt squat essentially has a hinge here, and then you're hooking into it here, and therefore it kind of hinges like this. Well, this stays still, and it hinges up and down like this, right? Now, what that means is the weight that's required over there is very high, because you get an advantage for being far away from that hinge point. So the hinge point's here, I'm lifting the weight from here, and it kind of hinges like this, whatever. This doesn't move, but fuck, I keep doing that, whatever. Anyway, and that makes it such that you can lift heavier weight, as if you're using a spanner. I'm not a fucking someone who works with tools much, but if I'm trying to loosen this nut and I try and use a spanner from here, I don't get a lot of leverage, but I get out here, and because this distance is longer, I can produce more force or more rotational force or torque. Same as on that. So all that to say is that I just need more weight over there to make it equally as hard, which is not a bad thing, but you are hauling weights back and forth and the such, so there is that efficiency downside. But I think it's worth it. Felt very good. Felt as if my hamstrings got a good stimulus. I like the stability. Now I feel less fatigued than I normally am at this stage after stiff-legged deadlift. So that's a thumbs up for me. Okay, so we are also swapping out the Bulgarian split squat with the dumbbells for a split squat with the Smith machine. Now, I have no real solid rationale behind this, just to do something different. Maybe the weight will change, maybe the loading will change, but that is fucking me terribly as well. So trying this to see if I can't reduce some of that fatigue from that exercise as well. So what I've got, I've just been off camera taking a couple of minutes here to kind of get my setup. So I've got the step box in front to elevate my front. I've got this roller back here, which you might not get the best angle at, but I'll show you in the working set that. And essentially what I'm going to do, I'll show you this foot first. I'll plonk this foot. So this box is set up directly underneath this bar. So to make this as glute dominant as possible, I'm looking for a whole bunch of
hip flexion, so getting my knee to my chest or chest to my knee to stretch my glute out, and trying to minimize the knee flexion to a certain degree such that the quads don't get too much stretch, because we're going to fuck the quads up in a second on the leg press, well and truly. So that goes directly underneath this. Foot goes on here, bar on the shoulders, and then we're down. Now I'm going with the step box in front, just a narrow elevation of the front foot, because I recall last time doing this and trying to get full hip flexion had me leaning forward a ton, and me leaning forward a ton had my back getting a little bit fatigued. So this elevation will get me that hip flexion without having to lean forward as much, but a potential downside is going to be more knee flexion, so more quads, potentially, but should be doable, should be effective. Let's build it up and let's hit our first working set, and then we can, you know, learn something from there. That's good. Myth machine, front foot and rear foot elevated split squat complete. Now, since doing that, I was looking over. I actually left my weight on there, so I'm gonna have to unload that in a second. I was thinking, I don't know why I'm elevating the front foot. Now, if I didn't have the rear foot elevation, maybe elevating the front foot makes sense for an increased range of motion. But with the rear foot elevation, does the front foot elevation make sense? Now, the rear foot elevation makes sense to me. Bear with me. It helps me not push through the back leg as well. Like when I'm just on the ground, I want to kind of push off the back leg. The rear foot doesn't allow that, so that feels nice. But the front foot elevation with the rear foot elevated, maybe that doesn't make sense. Maybe it will avoid leaning as far forward again, but I'll try that next week. Do I need that front foot elevation? If I go no front foot elevation and a lower rear foot elevation, that might take care of everything, but we will see next week. All right, so next up we have the leg press. So far this workout has gone a stiff-legged deadlift with the belt squat, and then it's got that rear foot elevated split squat. So that's hamstring dominant with a little bit of glutes. That's glutes dominant with a little bit of quads. This is now meant to be as quad dominant as possible, and I'll show you how to do that. So first stop, I've got the yoga blocks underneath my sort of lower back and hip region, is going to push me further this way, which is going to allow a larger range of motion and more knee flexion, hopefully allowing for more quad stretch. The other thing that I do is I keep my feet pretty low on the platform, and I have my weightlifting shoes. So the weightlifting shoes have the elevation of the heel, which due to my ankle mobility issues is going to allow more knee flexion. More knee flexion equals more quad stretch. More quad stretch hopefully leads to a better stimulus for the quads. That's the idea. So feet for me pretty low on the platform, pretty much as low as possible without the heels peeling off as I do this. Some short fucker was on here before, so we push up, handles come in, control it down, get to as much knee flexion as possible, drive up. Well, that feels pretty good. She's going to be a good one. So I might take this whole range of motion thing to a maybe an extreme level. Like I'm getting fucking massive knee flexion here, almost full knee flexion. Whereas like that might not be absolutely necessary, but there might be some potential benefits. So I'm not sure there is a downside necessarily. There could be. We might find out in the future that excessive range of motion leads to something, blah, blah, something else. But right now it's like, well, stretched or training the muscle in a stretched position seems to be a good thing. I'm going to make it as much as possible until the information comes out otherwise. So that's that. Let's give it something. We've got 3 sets, 1 heavy set, 2 more lighter sets for a high rep range. Come on. Come on. Nope. Come on. Come on. Yes! Yes! We have gone so far our stiff-legged deadlift on the belt squat, but I don't require, but I want a little bit more hamstring volume. So on this day, I also do some lying hamstring curls. Now, people will talk a bit of smack about the lying hamstring curl and how it's not as effective as the seated hamstring curl, which has got some direct support surrounding it. However, it doesn't mean it's not good. It's a decent variation and it will do a job for you. There is also another potential benefit that it has over the seated hamstring curl, which is some extra training of the sartorius, which is one of the inner thigh kind of groin muscles. So that's a good thing. But yeah, it's another variation. I've already doing the seated hamstring curl on another day. This just gives me a variation to do. And I've actually always felt that this one feels pretty effective. So I do it. I don't think that means it's better. I just do it as a variation. So, all right, that said, let's check in on the setup. So when we do this, we want to make sure that's lined up low down on the back of the ankle, too far up towards the knee or anything like that. You kind of just improve your leverages. So that might not be a massive deal, but you just want it to be consistent regardless. So I put it on the back of the ankle. I also make sure the setting is such that it's all the way down that way. So that has 2 settings for it. And then I bring my heels to the butt pretty aggressively, control the way down, and repeat. Now, a decently common fault that I see on this one is people kind of throwing their body into it to create momentum. So once you kind of lock that upper body in place, you hold on tight with these handles, forearms on this pad, and you just don't move that upper body to your best of your ability. If I start to kind of throw as I get aggressive with it, I might just create some momentum and essentially make my performance better than is actually the case because I'm creating that momentum. All right, let's bang them out here. 2 sets. Got all the hard stuff done, I would say, or the really fatiguing stuff. So now it's a couple finer tweaks. Let's get it. All right, so a couple of sets of adduction work, working on the adductors, as the name suggests. I've been doing this on both lower body days per week, one for a heavier sort of rep range, so about 5 to 10, and one for a more moderate rep range. For no other reason, just to vary it slightly. So could I go and do another adduction exercise on like a cave machine where you can tie the cuff thing to your foot and pull it across? Yeah, but I just can't be bothered. So I'm just going to do this, 2 different rep ranges. So far it's felt pretty good. So some technique pointers I give for this one is that when we kind of adjust it to its setting, essentially I'll take it pretty much as wide as my flexibility can allow, and that will be different for everyone. If your mobility is such that you can't get it all the way out, you just go to where you can. That's number one. The other thing here is that I will also lean back. Now, if we're doing a glute dominant version of this, where we're doing abduction, taking the leg away instead of pulling in, potentially leaning forward might feel more effective for some people because of a glute stretch or an increased stretch in the glutes. Now, being that the adductors are a hip flexor as well, if I am already flexing the hips, I might be shortening them a little bit, so potentially reducing some of that stretch. So leaning back to increase the stretch, and knees all the way out to increase the stretch again. Here, drive knees in. Control the out, gentle tap, drive. So trying to focus on this kind of inner part of my leg, like right up here. So far, so good on this one. We're making steady progress. I'm not doing heaps of it. 2 sets on this day, 2 sets on my other lower body day. That's it. Okay, let's go. Okay, next up we're going abdominals. So this is my somewhat unique abdominal exercise. We go GHD abdominal crunch or sit-up, whatever you'd like to call it. So I particularly like doing it on this machine because the curve of this allows for you to kind of stretch out the abs quite easily and make it such that it is about the abs and your hip flexors don't work as hard. So if you think about a standard sit-up off of the ground, you might have a neutral spine or a neutral-ish spine, and then you've got a little hip flexion. Here, essentially, I'll kind of roll my back over the pad and then crunch up. And I'm trying to initiate the movement by opening up my back and stretching out my abs versus any movement from my hips or anything like that. So this pad's good. They have things like what they call ab mats, which you could do this on the ground. This allows for an increased range of motion, which is good. And I found it to feel very, very, very effective. Now, in times gone by, I would do this with a superset from with my calf raises, and yeah, I'll do it now. So it's available, so let's go have a look at that. All right, so a superset of abs and calf raises should be really doable because, again, they don't really fatigue your system heaps. You're not coming off of one or the other and being like really tired or out of breath or anything like that. And therefore, you can kind of save a little bit of time going bup, 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 bup. And I'll do 4 total sets between the 2 of these. And this way I can save time. This is the GHD that we just demonstrated there is about like 6 meters away from me here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-ish meters away. So use that. Even if it's really hard, I'm not out of breath, my system's relatively okay. I can come over here and walk over, have a couple of deep breaths, jot down the reps that I accomplished, and then start this without too much dramas. And I just save a bunch of time doing it this way sometimes. If they're like on the other side of the gym, the 2 exercises you've got, that doesn't save heaps of time sometimes, but this way it does. Now the leg press calf raise, nothing to it. Essentially we put half the foot on the bottom of the plate here and half the foot is going to be underneath or able to go off. So I'll push up, stretch my calf underneath or stretch my ankle underneath to stretch out my calf, raise onto the toes, stretch, raise onto the toes. Nothing to it other than that. Pretty straightforward, this one. Really good because you get to sit down. The system isn't fatigued overall like a Smith machine or some other things like that. I did consider in this workout, because I'm doing my belt squat RDL, doing it alongside that, a belt squat calf raise, which is really good, which I'll consider in the future. But for now, we'll do this as a superset. So set here, set over there, and we rotate back and forth. All right, we get through 4 of these and we get a meal. So let's go do that.
Okay, that's a wrap on the workout, guys. I am plum tuckery-toed. That was tiring, but again, a couple of those variations I think made it more manageable. So although it seems like there's no real change at all that's been made, essentially I've gone from a stiff-legged deadlift to a stiff-legged deadlift on a belt squat. You would think, that's kind of like the same shit, but maybe a change is as good as a holiday, as I said, as they say. I've gone from doing a dumbbell rear foot elevated split squat to a Smith machine rear foot elevated split squat. Like, what's the difference there? And maybe the fact that it's just new helps. Maybe the fact that when things are new, it's lighter, and that helps till you learn to do it again, basically. Whatever it is, I feel fresher already, and I'm happy with that. And I can build these up for a couple of months potentially, and then slot the others back in there potentially in the future. But those, like, even holding those weights is tiring, you know what I mean? So it's, is the fatigue cost worth it? Potentially, potentially not. Now, one thing I've been spruiking lately is the idea of sort of building habits and having an identity. I think that the thing to keep in mind is that before we build habits, we essentially need a base level habit, and that is being disciplined. So being disciplined, I think the thing that's hard about that, self-discipline or whatever you want to call it, is that the only way to get better at it is to do it. You can't be gifted discipline. You kind of have to train the parts of your brain that are responsible for discipline and do those things over and over again. So, an example might be you're going to the supermarket and you say no to foods that you want because you know you have a goal of fat loss or weight loss or whatever it might be. That requires discipline. But that discipline is much easier than having those foods at home and having to say no to them all the time. That requires a lot more discipline. So if we can build the habit of doing the first one, eventually we might be able to do the second one, but also you could save yourself the hassle and just never have to do the second one. So those are some things to keep in mind. We need a habit of discipline before we can set habits sometimes, because habits take a little bit of time to form. And in those earlier stages, there might be a little bit of a grind or require a little bit of discipline to set the habit. So practice small, little discipline things, become a more disciplined person, and that will accumulate over time. All right, that wraps things up. A nice second lower body day of the week. Happy with how that went. Let's keep rocking. As always, guys, if you're liking what we're putting forward here, hit the subscribe up here. It's very much appreciated. If you want to see more content, hit the playlist up here. It has all videos and workouts and instructional content. And as always, it's about progress over perfection. Coach Dan, signing off.